Krilanovich. This is your first major literary award. Is that true?
Oh yes, definitely the first such honor.
It's very exciting.
Yes, I was shocked, to receive the honor, and I think it's amazing for such a small press book where when you publish the book, you just don't know how it's going to be received, and it's great when it gets picked up for something like this.
And especially, your book came out like literally 2 months ago, right?
Yes.
So this is a bit of a nice entrance into the world with this book, huh?
Yes, I feel like it changed the whole destiny of the book and opened up a lot of doors and a lot of opportunities that wouldn't be there otherwise. So
give me one door.
Exciting.
One door.
Well, I didn't, I just...
This can't be the door.
This isn't... just in terms of, anything, the novel I'm working on now that I've been working on for 3 years, I feel like it's so much easier to get people interested in it, and you just have this like momentum going into the next thing. So
you're not carrying all like pressure with you.
Well,
are you?
I think I'm far enough into the new book that it's not going to affect my writing of it. I think if I was starting a new novel, then it would be I would be thinking about that, and I don't want to be thinking about that.
Right. So I'm not going to make you think about that by asking you the rest of the questions about pressure, but I am going to ask you if it's true that you were named after Grace Slick.
Yes, that's true. And in the late 70s, no less, which is like probably about as low period as you can get for her.
Seriously?
Just bottomed out completely, but my parents were still fans after all those years.
Well, maybe that's why you became an overachiever to compensate for the low point at which you were named after Grace Slick.
It's like she's a godmother to me. And,
Does she know?
No.
Should we call her?
Well, I went to an art show of hers. She's a crazy, kooky lady, but
this is on camera.
Yes, I know, but I love Jefferson Airplane and Jefferson Starship very much. Especially the first 2 albums are great.
And you have your own band.
Well, yes.
Unicorn Head or something.
Unicorn Face is more on hiatus because we're at different ends of the West Coast, but someday we'll get back together.
That sounds good. Just one last thing. Do you know, what was more stressful today? Picking out the excellent outfit or deciding what pages you're going to read?
Oh. Well, I think they told us that we should only read for about 5 minutes, so that kind of makes it easy because you can't tell a complete story. It's like you just want to give a little taste. So it was easy to pick the excerpt.
Outfit? Hard?
Well, yeah, I went through a couple different options.
Designers
yes, but it's hard because there's events for the next 2 days, and so you have to think in terms of the whole week, and so you.
Welcome to the life of being a literary star.
Yes. Oh, I think it's great.
As you can see, I'm extremely worried about it.
And we still really believe in fiction. We love fiction. And we're here to talk about fiction's future. And I think that Grace Krilanovich is going to be very much a part of fiction's future. She comes blazing into view for us now as dazzling as the Northern Lights, or I suppose we actually should call it the Western Lights, since she lives in Los Angeles. Grace, who I've met tonight here for the first time, has written a novel with the weird and sort of difficult title, The Orange Eats Creeps. It's a book that I think our mainstream publishers missed, or perhaps Grace had the good sense to realize that it might not exactly work here. And she didn't even cement all of our friends here in the New York publishing world. Instead, she sent it to the remarkable people at $2 Radio, an Ohio-based company run by Eric Romanoff and Eliza Jane Wood, who are old-school lovers of literature and books and risk and fun and will already have a terrific string of books to their credit. Eric once said, "I want $2 radio to be a platform, a diving board from which writers, artists, and musicians can leap. $2 radio's mission is to reaffirm the literary, cultural, and artistic ambitions of the publishing industry." This noble mission is more than realized by the publication of the Arlington's Creeds, which is, sorry for this phrase, but the most startling, disturbing, and provocative novel I read this year, last year, maybe the year before that too. In her clear-eyed, compassionate, yet devoid of even one sentimental syllable portrayal of wild youth careening around the landscape that's at once utterly familiar and post-apocalyptic, Grace has announced herself as a writer of the greatest daring and depth. First of all, she can write about vampires without it seeming like crap. She can make it really grubby and frightening and really just terrible. It's noirish, it's gothic, it's hair-raisingly frightening in its portrayal of street people, and at the same time, so funny that if, as I did, you read this in bed with someone next to you, you'll drive them nuts with your guffaws and your insistence on reading some of the choicest bits aloud. I read somewhere that Grace had said she wanted to, quote, write a book that was messy and femmy and body-centric and leaky and lush, bland and overheated and insane. Well, she's done it. And more. In the words of the great Jerry Lee Lewis, she shook my nerves and she rattled my land.
It's an amazing honor to receive, and I want to thank Scott and the National Book Foundation for this. I'm just going to read a brief section from kind of towards the end of the novel. I think he's pretty much set the tone for these people. But this section involves potheads and Donner Party. A little under the weather, so, you know. The wind whipped down an empty road. I approached a house at the end of a raw, partially unearthed rock driveway. Inside the house, I found people stored in every crevice and roped off a massive dark wood attic where mattresses traced out a patchwork warren of rooms. All the squatters lived in among these partitions, a mess of ladders, platforms, lofts, and sub-lofts, odd corners you had to wedge your body up into in order to sleep. The sleep in this house was equally fractured by the intermittent gasps and munchings of others living out their variegated gutter punk fantasy lives in the same open space. A 17-year-old monk lived under the stairs, painted icons all day, and drank raw egg. There was talk of a girl living in the kitchen. She slept in there, in some random spot no one really knew because nobody had actually ever seen her sleeping. Another girl named Il showed me the crawl space under the house. For rent, only $98 a month. I noticed a chair sitting alone in the middle of the dirt, barely clearing the 3.5-foot ceiling. There used to be a girl who lived in there and she would just sit in that chair all day, Il said, drawing. I pressed the doorbell of another old house, the next on my list of possible places Seth, Knowles, Josh could be crashing. The buzzer twitched under my finger and it seemed as if I was electrocuting the house. A group of fruitarians who made thousands of dollars a week growing pot had commandeered a ski lodge-style manse on a parcel of pleasing oxalis and milkweed. I settled into their periphery, in a fort out by a woodpile loaded with wet spiders. One of the boys who lived in the house took his smokes out on the back porch. He looked intently in my direction, but I kept myself out there, rummaging around my stuff or whatever, catching up on some detail work. Or otherwise buried in some old magazines and stuff in the garage, including a box of old pamphlets from the 70s explaining the plight of the Donner Party to visitors at state parks, campsites, and visitor centers along Interstate 80. One day I woke from a nap and this guy was just waiting around outside my shelter. "What do you want, little boy?" I said, still horizontal. It was the way I talked to other people now. It corresponded with my new not giving a shitness. I had by then become as comfortable as any mammal could be, which is to say I fell into an abiding silence, puffed up, preening with my eyes well-trained to rustlings on the periphery. "Who are you calling little boy?" The young man, pug-nosed and hunky, his longish blonde hair parted at the side, said to me as he leaned against a peeling black-painted fence. He held one of his white stick arms crooked at the elbow, with the stick part poised in front of his earthworm lips. "Every time I come out here for a smoke, I see you sitting on that log, set up with a bunch of shit around you like your own little garage sale. What are you doing hanging out in Monmouth?" "I'm just making rounds to this side of the region, collecting things," I said, non-committal. "I thought I would meet up with my friends here, but they already left town." He held up a tarot card, one of mine from a bowl by the entrance to my shelter. "Watch, this is a man pulling this card. A man's fortune. Tell it to me." I took the card, but I didn't need to see what was on its face. I narrowed my eyes at the sun. I see the end of the game. Days that are few, imminent decay. I see a man with a large heavy coat. He's going to come and cover you with it. He probably didn't like that, but what am I supposed to say? It's all over his face. Though they were among the living, the squatters more resembled the stricken people of history, their bodies altered by a lifetime with fire. Powdery gray skin, black fingernails, not to mention the slick of oil guarding the darkness in the middle of their chests. Deadly caves sending off toxic plumes of smoke out of their mouths. Fire changed their bodies over in its own image, into something else, not dead, not living. They followed the smoke. Their clothes smelled of wet gaping embers, and they lived in calico-lined caves. They burned whatever they could. What little food they had raised was cast into the flames. Life itself was firewood. They burned each other by throwing hot rocks at passing carts. These doomed people of history were fire children. Well, one day the fire went out. Some people went out and climbed up into their wagons and set out to find where the fire had gone. They searched and called out until they couldn't anymore, and they lay down and died. Answered to no name but doom. They ate death in the snow when it was winter and all this was covered in ice. I wonder if their handmade clothes got caught on a thicket of snow-covered firs, if their dresses snagged on snow-covered blackberry bushes. I wonder if they had cuts that wouldn't heal, feeling around with those numb, useless hands. Could they even build a fire with their hands like that? A fire in the middle of the snow? There weren't any fires for hundreds of miles around, and the damp flame in each body was so easily extinguished. But there was one there on the trail, all right. Their collective misery built a house of flames in the middle of the forest, a tent of burning fibers braided through with suffering. The corpulent membrane blew up like a balloon and sat empty like an incubator of death trapped at the bottom of the trees, which hissed, "Remember, it's black. It's always black." Thank you.